Welcome everyone. Welcome to this edition of Crashes and Taxes. It's going to be a very important podcast, and I am going to really divide this podcast into two segments. The first segment is our traditional standard podcast that we are used to doing, hearing, having. And I really highly recommend that you join this as a video because I am going through a lot of slides today. As a summary of where we are and what's happening. So if you normally listen to this, I would encourage you for this once to actually watch the actual podcast video. At the end of the first part, I am going to stop that and I'm going to move into a part about me personally. And it takes a lot of nerve for me to share this with you guys. So it will be very personal, and I don't normally ever, and I literally mean ever, get personal with you guys. But it's something that I need to share with you. And my Instagram is going crazy because my team just posted something. So literally the phone, if you hear my phone buzzing, it's because all of Instagram is going crazy. So let's get started. The first thing I want this is part one. Again, for those of you that do not care to hear anything personal, and when we get to that, I will give you a disclaimer about what I'm going to talk to you about. So I will let you know when we end. The first segment was just a traditional, economic forecast and all these things I'm thinking, and then we'll move into the personal part. The personal part could be offensive to some of you, so I will let you know when I'm moving to that, and I will let you know if you want to jump off now. Please jump off now, because what I don't want is to share some things with you on a personal note and then have a lot of you reach back out to me and say, oh, blah, 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 blah. And, it's what I'm sharing from my life and my heart. And if you don't agree with it or you don't care to hear it, please do not listen. But also, please do not reach out and contact us and give us negative feedback, because it is my heart that we're talking about. And that can't be controlled by anybody but you. You control your heart, I control mine. So let's get started. Let me bring up the slide show here. And I want you to see here that we're starting with control your assets, maximize your wealth. That's my philosophy, my whole life. Control your assets, maximize your wealth. It has worked well for me my whole life. And it has worked well for my clients. And this is our philosophy here at my practice at Walser Wealth. And I share this philosophy with you on Crashes and Taxes, the podcast. So let's move on. I want to point this out for a reason. You'll see why next. First thing I want to go through, Instagram is driving me out of my mind. The first thing I want to go through is the S&P 500 at its inflection points. And we're going back in time now. You can see we're going back here to February of 2022. And I want you to notice that what happens with this S&P 500 inflection point is that you don't get to an inflection point until you get a sea change of direction. So what an inflection point, in fact, is it is, okay, we were going along this, I'm going to add myself here. We were going along this way, and then all of a sudden everything stopped. And instead of going up, now the market is going down. The point at which it begins a different direction is what we call the inflection point. And then we're able to measure the upside to the downside, so we can see how much trajectory change and how big that change was over time. We can measure the total changes over time. So you guys know I've taken you through the Federal Reserve since 2008 and everything that's happened. But I want you to see something that in February of this year, in February of 2022, we had not yet reached an inflection point to the downside. In other words, you can see that we were at the top here in February of 2020 prior to coronavirus, 33.86, dropping down March 23rd low of 22.37, rising 95% to February 28, 2022, 95%. That was pre-inflection point. If we fast forward now to June, you can see that the S&P 500 now is clearly at and has hit an inflection point. And that inflection point was January 3rd of 2022. So the first thing I will tell you is, again, I've said to all of you, for the last 12 years, almost 14 years, barring coronavirus in there. The last 14 years, you've been able to basically take a dart, throw it at a dartboard, and you would come up pretty good returns, self-managing, don't need a professional, don't need to understand what's going on really in the world. You'd be fine. And that's true because as I've gone through in previous podcasts, the Federal Reserve went crazy from a historical perspective, beginning in 2008 with our too big to fail mentality and our quantitative easing and our MMT, our modern monetary theory beliefs really came through in the last 14 years, capped off at a height, obviously, through coronavirus. So what you can see now that we're in June and we finally clearly do see we had an inflection point is this. We can see that from the low of March of 2020, 2237 through January 3rd, which was the beginning of the decline, we went up on the S&P 114%. And it is almost a straight line up. Anytime you see this kind of economic recovery that fast, any kind of slope of a line that is almost straight up is absolutely indicative of manipulation and stimulus money that is not maintainable in the long haul. There's a lot of MMTers that believe, oh, just keep stimulating, keep stimulating, keep stimulating. They've run our world basically for the last 14 years. And now we are where we are. This is going to be one of probably the more difficult podcasts I do from an economic perspective because it really leads you down to a very clear conclusion. And that conclusion is not encouraging. And it is not without tremendous anxiety. However, I am not on a newscast where all we're trying to do is give you that the sun and the sky is beautiful and it's a beautiful day when behind me there is, this huge economic storm. So this is a show about reality. And it is not ever intended to scare you, but it is intended to empower you with knowledge that you might not be getting in other locations so that you can piece these puzzles together for yourself. I don't need to spell this out for you. You're going to see it for yourself. You're going to see it for yourself. And then because of the conclusions that you're going to be making in this very podcast, I will leave you with my personal information that I feel is important at this time. So what I can show you is that we went up 114%, almost a straight up recovery, is completely stimulated by the Federal Reserve, 100%. There was nothing organic about this recovery from coronavirus. And then since then, January 3rd was our peak in the S&P. We had NASDAQ and Dow peak a teeny bit earlier, but you can see that we are now trending down through June 30. So this is not obviously including the month of July. We're not yet furnished with July, and we are down year to date on the S&P through the end of June, 21%. So clearly the top of our market was basically the end of last year. I think I've shared with you guys in the past, maybe I haven't because I don't talk a lot about what I do with my practice on the podcast. This is really just for non-clients who are interested in, economic perspectives outside information. And what I will say is that, we can leave that. We can leave that for later. I will come back to that. So let's move on. All right, let's start with this. So this is coming out this past Friday, July 22nd, and the U.S. PMI crashes into contraction in July, a worrying deterioration in the economy. So basically, this is, again, and I've told you guys this, that 2022 is the year of the macro economy. It is not about the micro. So if you're watching, news channels and they're talking to you about, we had a couple things that have happened recently, but we actually had some good positive news. I love to have some positive news. I'll give you some. Boeing, was up to the positive this week because of the delivering of the Dreamliners finally that got through all of those crazy things. But we also see that travel actually is resilient right now, and Hilton raised their forward guidance for the next quarter, thinking that the travel demand is really inelastic and strong. And then we also have the other stories to the downside. So we saw that Walmart is cutting their profit outlook for this year because there's too much cost going to food and gas that people aren't buying as much as they could or would have before. We also got a really stark warning from AT&T that people were not paying their bills. Now, AT&T really provides two services, cell phone service and cable service. So that's your Wi-Fi at home or your pretty much your Wi-Fi at home, I would think. And a lot of people are streaming now and they cut the cord on the cable box. But again, I guess if you still have traditional cable, Verizon, Fios, if you have their cables, their internet service, you might also have Verizon, Fios over the set-top box cable service. So that's Verizon. I'm talking about AT&T. But AT&T had our partnership with DirecTV that they sold off. So basically, we're talking about still where they would deliver wireless services and as well as their cell phone bills. And people are not paying their bills. So when people aren't able to pay for their Wi-Fi or their cell phones, you know that they are struggling because these are the things that we all need to communicate and connect to the rest of the world on a daily basis. So we do have some really tremendously flashing indicators. We also had what we call an inverted yield curve, where the 2-year yield was higher than the 10-year, and was one of our longer inverted yield curves. It held for quite a while. And so that is also very indicative of a recession. I am recording this on Wednesday, July the 27th, and you guys will get it out this week. As I record this, I do not have the official release of Q2 GDP data, but as far as we understand it from the Federal Reserve, Atlanta Federal Reserve, it is negative, and it is negative, I believe, to the point around 2.1% to the negative. So that will come on the backs of a Q1 of negative 1.6 as revised, giving us 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, which formally met the definition of a recession. This administration this week is actually talking about changing the definition of a recession so that the administration can go on mainstream media that people are listening to that are still too busy with their lives and their TikTok and their social media to pay attention to what's really going on in this world and just believe, okay, well, this administration says we're not in a recession, so we're not. So there's a lot of dystopian things happening that start to make you think beyond traditional what is going on in this world. And that is what we are thinking about and worried about sort of now. So let's move into this. So this is from the article. I wanted to actually read it to you. And this is, there was a graph, that was the Bloomberg was the source of that. You can see, mirroring the Eurozone plunge, the U.S. Composite Index plunged into contraction, a 26-month low, signaling a notable contraction in the economy and suggesting a technical recession is imminent. The preliminary PMI data for July points to a worrying deterioration in the economy. Excluding pandemic lockdown months, output is falling at a rate not seen since 2009 amid the global financial crisis. This survey data includes GDP falling at an annualized rate of approximately 1%. Manufacturing has stalled. The service sector rebound from the pandemic has gone into reverse as the tailwind of pent-up demand has been overcome by the rising cost of living. So we could move and keep going on, but what we're clearly beginning to see, no matter what this administration wants to put out there, is that we are in a recession. And you know what? That's so basic. We need to get beyond that because we're really in a much different place than recession. Let's move on. I grabbed this from CNBC, and you can see that we're looking at the banks now here, investment banking revenue, and this is for Q2, and these are the year-over-year declines. So a lot of people said, oh, well, the banks and the financials, and I've seen a lot of clients that have come over this year that have been overweighted to the financial side, thinking that the interest rates rising would make the banks perform absolutely well. You can see here, it's the exact opposite. JP Morgan Chase down 61% year over year. Morgan Stanley down 55%. Bank of America down 47%. Citigroup down 46%. Wells Fargo down 45%. Goldman Sachs down 41%. That is their revenue decline year over year from Q2 of last year. So what's happening is as interest rates go up, the main source of lending, car loans and mortgage loans at banks are drying up. We had a massive change from June to July. And with the federal rate interest rate hike coming today, again, this will further exacerbate the fact that no one is able to or wants to lock in mortgages now at these higher rates. And certainly this is only going to exacerbate as the mortgage rates continue to rise for the rest of this year. We already know, based on where the federal funds rate is right now, that the Fed has said they want to double that by the end of the year. So let me explain to you, let me just check my next slide to make sure I don't need to get this slide now. Okay, so let me explain to you. So you can understand, everyone looks at equities every day. We track equity markets. We're focused on equity markets. We're long-term holding equity markets. That's our long-term growth position. But as far as the financial world, bonds run the world. They run governments, all government funding in the form of bonds, short-term, long-term treasury notes, treasury, everything. So that's the United States I'm talking about, same as all governments around the world. You've got the IMF that basically comes into a country and says, hey, we'll give you a lending program if you will agree to bring in this group and that group. And it is a way to commercialize non-commercialized entities and give them the funding to do it. So our debt fiat-based system is what we've been doing since we untethered to gold in the United States in 1971. And that, in fact, is where we are. And I want to put this into perspective as layman terms as I possibly can. Since 2008, when we really entered the too big to fail world, which is the modern version of modern monetary theory, which basically says we can spend and print as much money as we want, as long as we can continue to service the debt through taxation. That is the MMT version, a very simplified version. And so I want you to understand that bonds run the world, not only the governments of the world and the international funds of the world and the NGOs of the world, but corporations issue debt. Now, they also issue equity, so they also have that. But you're talking about R&D and projects that are issued and have long-term debt financing those things. Now, most countries never actually pay off their debt. No, because modern monetary theory talks about collecting enough revenue in taxes to service the debt, which simply means to pay the interest on an annual basis. It is not about principal reduction. That's the whole point of MMT. You don't have to pay off the debt. You simply need to collect enough taxes to service the debt. So what ends up happening is when debt matures, and we've had 14 years now since 2008 of next to zero interest rates in the United States, which is a barometer for a lot of the central banks around the world. They usually do follow the Fed, although they've been a little more slow this year. But normally ECB, Bank of Japan, Bank of England is going to follow the Fed's actions, at least in theory. And so you can see that since in 2008, we've had almost zero interest rate. We've almost had next to zero interest rate, 25 basis point Fed funds rate. And what we're witnessing the Fed do is in 2021, they sort of just subterfuge the storm that they were building by saying that the inflation was transitory. And you know what? Shame on us for not holding them accountable in 2021. Shame on us for not looking at the fact that the M1 money supply literally in 5 months went up $5 trillion in 5 months. This is unfathomable. So we didn't call them out. They got away with saying it was transitory until it got to 2022 and it was no longer able to be said that it was transitory. And then the Fed switched gears and said, no more stimulus. We're stopping the stimulus. That didn't really come until, a little bit past spring. But not only are we stopping the stimulus and we're moving to tightening QT instead of QE, quantitative tightening, but we are also going to raise interest rates so aggressively fast that you will not believe how fast we get this Fed fund rate to over 3%, which is their goal this year, from 3 to 3.2, a doubling of what it currently sits at before the July rate hike. So we are looking at the fastest escalation of rates in comparison to a 14-year previous run of almost zero interest rates. And what does this do for the corporations and the governments that have to refinance the debt that is coming to maturity? In other words, remember, we're not paying off the debt. We're simply issuing new bonds and new debt to get that money to then basically pay off the old debt. Well, they're paying off old debt at near zero interest rates, or where they were. I mean, obviously there's a markup for risk premium and all of that. But they're paying off debt that's costing them next to nothing, and they're walking into debt that is now going to cost them 3x, 4x, 5x the cost. This is the collapse, almost engineered, of the international bond market. And the bond market is in charge of so many things. Our pension fund system in the United States is inextricably tied to bonds and bond rate policies. So these interest rate hikes this fast after 14 years of near zero is a huge, huge red flag. What is going on? What is the Fed trying to do? Now, what you're starting to see is the economies of the world beginning to implement two things. The first thing that we're seeing is that, I'll give you some examples, at Holland, Canada, Ecuador, you're starting to see this great reset, which is very much tied to the green energy movement, start to tell countries they must cut their fertilizer usage by 30%. They must cut their nitrogen by 30%. Now, the margin in farming is not anywhere near that high, that farms can continue to exist with those kind of ecological restraints. And so what we're now seeing is a lot of people did not even plant this year because it was economically unviable based on the price of fertilizer. We're seeing that herds that were to be our food supply next year aren't able to be fed through their grain, or they're not able to be watered because of water problems, water restrictions and scarcity. So we're starting to see people sell what was supposed to be our food supply for next year. You guys all are familiar with 2008 and The Big Short, and a gentleman named Michael Burry, who's very elusive, but he is the one in The Big Short that got it right, that figured it out, and that warned everybody. This is a recent tweet of him, and he's very sporadic on Twitter. He'll come on, say something like this, and then he'll jump off. He'll delete his account. So this is something that he shared recently. Transitory, no. Peak, no. To the moon, if you meet a cold, dark place. And then he quotes, the CPI news this morning was so awful that it changed the bond market's view of Fed trajectory, and the weakest sector broke. In bond jargon, MBS, which is mortgage-backed securities, went no bid, which means no buyers for MBS. The Federal Reserve in their quantitative tightening is not only not stimulating by issuing additional debt, but they are selling their existing debt. Michael Burry is letting us know that something here. And here's another tweet by him. All hype speculation is doing is drawing in retail before the mother of all crashes. Fear of missing out. Parabolas don't resolve sideways. When crypto falls from trillions or meme stocks fall from tens of billions, Main Street, not Wall Street, but Main Street losses will approach the size of countries. History ain't changed. That's his words. And that's a quote. Now, I'm going to take my face off for a second because this is a YouTube. Sorry. And I want you to be able to go yourself to this YouTube and watch it if you want to. And this is titled Michael Burry, Mother of All Crashes is Here, based on his tweets. And this is on YouTube from June 25th of this year. So what we have is the man who got 2008 right with credit default swaps, investing his clients into insurance policies against the credit default swaps that failed. He is now saying it's the mother of all crashes. And I'm trying to lay out a case for you to see this for yourself. So let's go outside into the world. We know that we have an uprising in Ecuador. We know that we have an uprising in Holland. We know that China is now implementing the same restrictions that the Dutch farmers are dealing with, and that we are expecting to see Canada go into a farmers' strike very soon. We know that Ecuador is collapsing. We know that Sri Lanka has collapsed and is bankrupt. We see that the government of Israel has dissolved itself and the prime minister has stepped down. We see that Boris Johnson of the UK has stepped down. We see multiple governments, at least 9 prime ministers across this world having resigned in just the last 8 to 12 weeks. What is going on? This economic news is the Economic Times. This is an Indian publication, and you can see this is dated July 21st. You can see China deploys tanks to prevent people from withdrawing money from crisis-hit banks. It's a reminder of the Tiananmen Square incident. But this article talks about the fact that there are banks in China that have nationalized the savings accounts of their consumers, and that they're saying they're not able to get them because the accounts have now been invested in China and that the money is no longer in their savings account. This is what we call nationalization. This is when political collapse comes and governments can't print money. No one will buy the dollars they're printing. We have the petrodollar collapse that has happened because of Russia being kicked out of SWIFT. And that has already occurred. We already have so many oil sales that are existing and are occurring now outside of the US dollar. And so we do see bank failures already in the world, and we see them obviously in smaller countries, but now we see in China even tanks on the streets because they have nationalized consumer deposit accounts. If we go here, we're looking now, this is at the World Economic Forum. This is the World Economic Forum meeting from this year. And I just wanted to get this one article for you that you could see. Global debt has passed 300 trillion as of last year. This covers borrowing by governments, businesses, and households. And the International Monetary Fund warns that this is a dangerously high level. COVID-19 obviously led to unprecedented borrowing, and now the war in Ukraine is pushing global debt even higher. Low-income countries and households suffer the most, and this is why you're starting to see third world economies collapse. They are the first. They are the weakest, so they are the first to collapse. China is the second largest economy in the world. Their GDP is actually surpassing ours, and they're nationalizing their consumer accounts. Not the whole country, but they're beginning. We're starting to see it. I think we need to know what's happening before it all comes to, once it all happens and we know, you don't need me to tell you what's happened. The other thing that has happened is we have the EU voting in May to cut their reliance on Russia, which is right now about 60%, 55 to 60% on average for all of Europe, to depend on Russia for their energy. Germany went from a net exporter for the last 30 years to not a net exporter for the first time in the last month. And we're asking, if Russia cuts the gas supplies to Germany, what's next? France and Germany are both economically extremely susceptible to what is going on with Russia. So this is a huge headwind for the United States, on top of China, which is obviously our biggest situation. So what I want you to understand is that it is unfathomable that economists that understand markets, that have been working in international markets for their careers, would have a 14-year run of next to zero interest rates, would have a global pandemic where we shut everybody down, burn down the economy, which then allows us to print globally $30 trillion. Remember, global debt, the IMF told us this year is at 300 trillion. So if we printed 30 trillion in the last 24 months because of Corona, we've printed 10% of our total global debt in the last 2 years. This is getting us to a tipping point that is unfortunately not sustainable. It has been occurring to me that if you wanted to move to a much more green energy that wasn't dependent on fossil fuels, that wasn't dependent on oil trade, that wasn't releasing as much methane gas in livestock across the nations, that you could engineer an economic environment for a decade or so where things are really low, really cheap, assets and values and bubbles are created and grow. And then you have this pandemic that you shut down everybody that's healthy and you shut down businesses so that now we have an economic collapse so that we can print 10% of our total global debt in just 24 months and get our entire system to the point of no return such that it collapses. And now everyone has to look to the governments of the world to save us. The Great Reset is a push by the World Economic Forum to move us to a more collaborative, one world sort of government system where we're all on central bank digital currencies and everything we do is digitized and controllable. This is a very cynical and skeptical viewpoint that these things are being engineered in a controlled fashion, but at this point, there can be no other conclusion. The actions that have been taken are clearly intentional actions by forces that run the global financial world. And private wealth, we know from their Agenda 2030, is very clearly something they do not want people to have. This is why one of their main taglines was, by 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. They're even planning on having you lease your light bulbs. So everything is going to be IoT, Internet of Things. And you will no longer own your lights. They will be connected by the grid to the light company, and the light company will know when they're out. And without you even calling them, they will be coming to replace them for you. And you will be paying them a leasing fee for the rest of your life on your lights. We are to own nothing. Only the people that are in the government and that run the world would be the ones that would own and have private wealth. And the rest of us would be beholden to a universal basic income, call it UBI, or something like that, through a release through a central bank digital currency. And that is how we would continue to live. So I tell you all this not to in any way depress you, but you must wake up and see the truth of what's going on. There are not people that are telling us what's really going on here, because we have to keep the markets as investable as possible for as long as possible so that the people that actually had the money in the accounts can get them out as the billionaires exit. Main Street is left holding the bag. And then you've got the bond collapse that affects pensions for everyone. And so we are at the end of the global fiat system as we have known it, really since World War II. We've been inching towards really just completely untethered, no asset-backed currencies, and really went crazy hog wild since the 70s. And that is a system that is completely collapsible. And if you do nothing and you let it get to the point where it's just so much more debt in the world than there are actual true assets, which is the point that we're at, you will have a collapse of the system, and everyone that doesn't have the ability to feed their families or maintain their housing, which is most everybody, is going to be amenable to whatever government can come along and feed our children. And this is how enslavement happens. So it is important to me to share this perspective with you that I'm piecing together, that others that are watching the global economic situation play out are piecing together. Don't listen to it's transitory. Don't listen to we're going to get this under control. This is going to collapse. And if you stay in through the collapse and lose most of what you have, the Fed is not coming again behind you like they did in 2008, since 2008, and fixing it. There's no bailout coming in 2023 or ever, because there's no money left. Governments are calling different entities around the world and saying, we need money, and there's no money coming. The United States can't bail the world. We owe just as much as everyone else, if not more. So I don't tell you any of that to scare you. I tell you that to empower you, to make you think, what have I been doing and what do I need to do now? You know, a lot of people come to me every day and they want to know where the growth is, where the growth is, where the growth is, what sector, what stock, where, what. And I need you to understand, when you look at a systemic market retrenchment, and I am talking about a global systemic market retrenchment, this is not it. This is the tip of the spear that we're looking at. When we're talking about that, there is no force on earth that can come in and save us from this. It could only be supernatural. So use this to empower yourself to make different choices. Don't listen and just stay the course and do nothing. One of the most important things you can do when you're going through a global financial change, as we are now in, is to take ownership of your responsibilities for your family and for yourself and say, what do I need to do? And I will just encourage you and empower you to tell you that preservation of what you've already built is the most important goal right now in 2022. There are going to be so many people that do not hear this message and do not make the changes, and they're going to go down with the bonds and the equities. Their funds are going to go down with them. If you can move and pull, and you can design things that have the safety that, like we do, you know, our clients, we can't tell you exactly what the other side of this looks like, but we can tell you with planning and not exposing to too many things that you can be very successful through this time. But preservation and protection is the name of 2022. It is the name of 2022. It is not about growth and which sector is going to perform, because I could tell you one sector could perform great in 1 second, and then something could change eminently, and all of a sudden that sector, you know, changes. And so we can't really say this sector is going to do great now. We can have speculation for 1 quarter or so, but things are moving so fast right now, so fast, that things are changing so fast that we must be empowered. And so that's the end of my economic summary. And I want to move now to the second part. And this is personal and it might offend some people. So I am totally comfortable with all of you dropping off and only those of you that want to stay to hear something about me personally. And then again, if you do stay, please, I'm a lawyer, so I can try to get you guys to agree to this. But this is very personal. This is from my heart. This is not anything. I mean, if you want to wish me well and give me good feedback and all of that, please, by all means, but please do not reach out to me and say that you were offended that I brought this into this podcast. I'm telling you, if you don't want to know anything beyond economics and data, jump off now and we'll see you next week. For the rest of you, I want to share something with you that's very, very, very private for me. And you know, I don't get very personal with you guys very often. And I think that I have to this time. I have to do that. So I'm going to try to get through this without tearing up. But I want to share something about my faith with you. I was raised in a Christian home, and both of my parents came from quite a bit of money. And this happens with a lot of my clients. They do well and they make a lot of money. And it's the kids that are the spoiled ones that we have to really work on. Because when a child is denied the reason to really figure out how they have to work hard in life, a lot of times they don't. And so the generation that makes all the wealth and creates the businesses and has the hard work ethic then is giving their kids a life where they're not seeing that what they had to go through to get to that point. And unfortunately, that recipe happens over and over and over and over. So for me, it was that way. My parents had wealth when they were growing up, and when they got together, they didn't have any really understanding. And I love my parents and I respect them so much, but they didn't have really a great handle on finances because how they were raised. It's not their fault. Their parents didn't instill that in them. And so that affected me very young from financial perspective. I was aware of money at a very, very young age. And I said to myself, well, I am going to grow up and I'm going to figure this whole thing out. And this is not going to be my life. And I'm not going to struggle financially, and I'm going to be successful. And from the world's perspective, I've done that. I've been successful. We're a top 100 advisor. We're, we have a growing practice. We've got a lot of respect across all sectors of the media. We have, we've achieved a lot of success, from a perspective of education. I have 4 college degrees, highly educated, very highly respected schools, high degree of contacts globally at the executive level. So all positive, financially successful, achieving the financial security that I was searching for my whole life. But this job has been really hard for me for the last 18 months. Because a lot of things that are supposed to work in economics haven't been working. And you hold yourself accountable to clients, to podcasts, on explaining what's going on in the world, and yet you can't explain it because it's not working how economics works. There's a lot of stuff I can't share with you guys what I'm talking about, but it's highly suspect when precious metals are gapping down and inflation's in double digits. That doesn't happen. It's highly suspect that precious metals and gold is gapping down as equities are crashing. That doesn't happen. It's highly suspect that our price of oil goes down as we diminish our strategic reserves 20 million barrels a day by October, when strategic petroleum reserves, SPR, is for war, famine, disaster. It's not to lower our price at the pump by 10 cents for the next 3 months. We are going to have nothing in our reserves. So when you get to the point where you realize all that you've worked for, all that you've counted on, all that you've relied upon isn't working as it's supposed to, and there's something else that's going on globally that is not going the way it's supposed to, and that there's these forces that are working to push something to a conclusion that is intentional. Realize that your human ability to deal with this is really constrained. And you get to the point where you realize you just have to tell people what's going on and pray for them that they will get through it. And so I am telling you that I have relied on my own brain and my own abilities my whole life. And right now, we have to call on God. We need his help, because there are a lot of people in this world, especially our third world countries, although America is going to be affected as well. We have a lot of people here that are living check to check, margin to margin. It's time for us to help our brother and sister. It's time for us to make sure that we have food, that if they need help, we can help them. They need water, we can help them. It's time for us to prepare, because from now until the end of this year, we are going to see the craziest things happen that have never been seen on the history of time on this earth. And I know that is happening. I see it. It has already started. And I want you to be aware of it, and I want you to see it. And I want you to realize that human beings aren't going to save us through this. And if you have ever had any kind of faith, this is the time to realize that this is a God thing. We have to rely on God. God is what is going to make the difference for the people that call out to him and rely on him, and those that don't. We are at the precipice, and it is happening this year. So just wanted to share that I'm doing the best I can to share as much as I can publicly. I can't share everything, obviously, but I share as much as I possibly can publicly without you guys. I don't want you to freak out. I know some of my own clients listen to this podcast every week, and then they are upset about what's happening. They call us and say, well, if I'm doing everything, we are doing everything we can. And we've already done everything we can, and we are making everything as safe for our clients as possible. But, there's this beautiful line in the movie, The Notebook, and it's where the husband was getting the checkup by the cardiologist because he had a heart condition, and his Alzheimer's wife, who he was in the nursing home to take care of because she didn't remember anybody, including him, was at a piano, and she could read sheet music. So she was playing the piano and reading the sheet music. And the cardiologist is talking to the husband, and he's saying, "Oh, your wife's condition is deteriorating. Have you thought about what you're going to do? It's not good." And that's where the science is. And the husband replies, and then she stops playing. So the husband says, "Shoot, they forgot to turn the page." And then she begins to play again. And the doctor says, "Must have turned the page." And the husband responds, and I'm sorry if you're not following this, go watch this scene. The husband responds and said, "No, doctor, that would be her memory." And he said, "There's only so far that man can go. And then there's God." And because that's where we are, I needed to tell you that. Prepare. This is going to be big. And we're doing everything we can. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to rely on God on this one. If I didn't care about you guys, I wouldn't do this podcast.